Much for your company. I am Pius Kojubaka. Looking at our stories, Finance Minister Dr. Ato Forson will this week engage the country's development partners, donors, creditors, and investors in Washington, D.C., USA. And this will happen as the Finance Minister leads government's delegation to the annual World Bank IMF meetings in that country. And of course, my colleague George Yafe will pretty soon join us for more on that. But we want to bring in the views of Associate Professor of Finance at Andrews University, Williams Pripra. Thank you so much, sir, for making time to join us here on Business Life. And good to see you. Now, what role do you expect the IMF and, of course, the World Bank to play in supporting Ghana's economic development? And how can Dr. Forson effectively utilize these institutions to achieve his objectives?
Good evening to you, Pius, and good evening to our viewers. So we know that IMF and World Bank cherish Ghana's economy, and in their books, Ghana is an economy that really follow their rules and does well in most of its economic activities. Until recently, we deviated from our pattern, and we went to IMF for them to give us a bailout. And we followed their instructions, especially through their guidance, then to be able to come out of this economic conundrum that we find ourselves. Indeed, all investors look up to IMF to point to a country that ensures safe, sound economic, macroeconomic indicators, and that is where we have reached now. Relying on Dr. Forson, relying on IMF's directives, will be able to convince investors and tell them that yes, we were out of gear. We deviated, but now we are back on track. We are more disciplined. If you're able to invest in Ghana, you will be able to get the expected returns and be able to repatriate your money back. So this is the good news that he's going to sell with the support of IMF and World Bank.
All right. So for you, what are the potential benefits and risks, really, if they are, associated with seeking donor support and investor buying? And of course, how can Ghana balance its economic interests with expectations of its development partners, you would say?
So, as we are aware, every year when we prepare our budget in Ghana, we don't have all the funds enough to take care of ourselves, and we need that support. So, the donor funding comes in to areas that, let me put it, to give up a support to our budget. So, this is very, very important. Well, we all know anyone giving you money will have his or her interest.
Absolutely.
And we must also have our interest. So I'm sure that if our interests align, that is when the money will flow from the donor to us. And most of the donors will want to ensure that the money that they are giving solve a specific need. We all know that now they are focusing on poverty alleviation, sustainability levels and stuff. So donors, that is where they are focusing on, and they want the government to also ensure that the money goes to such people. So we must see some alignment between both government and the donor, and that is what it really will help. And one other thing is that the world, we live in a global village. No one is an island. So Ghana may not be giving to the world in terms of money as donation, but we have resources which we are also giving to the world. So in the same vein, the donor will help us to create the work manforce or working class in Ghana to produce what they need, and then we will export them to the countries as they need them. So that is where we find that allegiance and both parties will benefit.
And how would this experience as a finance minister impact Ghana's engagement with international financial institutions and investors alike? And what outcomes are we to expect from his participation in the meetings?
So we know Ato Forson's level in government, served in parliament for years, a deputy finance minister, and now a finance minister, a minority leader, majority leader for a short while. So in terms of his knowledge about governance is there, and also his financial acumen is sharp. He's very young, If you look at how he models his understanding of finance, he thinks of the people and what must really help Ghana. With this experience, I know when he meets any investor, he'll be able to convince them and tell them why they must invest their money in Ghana. Also, with the backing of his advisors, not forgetting the former finance minister, Tepe, his boss, and other qualified individuals with experience, I'm sure he'll be able to do very well. If you also look at it, you could also see that there is a good working relationship between all the directors of the Ministry of Finance and him.
Yeah,
it's something that we can attest to based on what we see and what we watch when he comes on television. Wherever he goes, he allows them to also come in. So if you have such a person leading your finance ministry who has a listening ear, people are going to advise him, and then he's also going to make sure that at least convince investors that and tell them these are the risks you face here, but I can assure you the expected returns are more than the risks that you hold. So that is his plus. He has a very good strength. And one other thing I've noticed from him is that he's open. Some of us, we are here, he reaches out to us on some issues that we share. And so he's someone who is open and seeking for more advice. So that's what I noticed that is his strength and his experience.
Maybe one more on this, if you can do that for me in a minute. What message do you think Ato Forson should convey to the international community regarding Ghana's economic priorities and, of course, reform agenda? And how can he effectively communicate Ghana's value position to potential investors?
So he must go with the president's vision, the resetting agenda of Ghana. So the economic indicators has reset now, we all know. Debt to GDP has come to within limit of 50% of debt to GDP. Our CD has appreciated, and so it points to some strength within the economy. So he must go and sell Ghana that we have reset, and then we are set to do business with any other investor who is ready to do business with us.
All right. Finally, before we part company with you, sir, back home in Ghana, we know the Bank of Ghana has revised the sanctions for issuing dark checks as it tightens punishment for offenders. Why are people still engaging in that? Hence, the tougher sanctions by the regulator we are seeing.
So the more dark checks are issued, let me use the Ghanaian terminology. Bounce checks are issued. It weakens your financial institutions. There is research pointing to the fact that developed countries are developed because of their financial sector. So as a developing country hoping to be developed, if we allow individuals to issue Ghanaian term bounce checks that bounce, it is going to destroy the entire financial system. We don't want to let this become a systemic effect. So I'm sure the strong sanctions Bank of Ghana has issued will solve it once and for all. I'm hoping that all the banks and savings and depositing institutions will comply. If you look at the sanction very well, the 10%, 15% or 20% charge is not a fee or an income to the bank. It's a levy that must be paid to the Bank of Ghana. So what I probably will want to see if Bank of Ghana will come out further and say if a bank fails to report, what sanction must be applied to that bank, which I couldn't read that one from it. Probably they must even pay more on that, and that is something that will really help to solve this issue. Because sometimes I've been in finance before in Ghana, so I know what we do as finance people. We can even negotiate with the bank and tell the bank, allow us this check to then use a Ghanaian check, let it bounce. Yeah. Then I'm going to bring you the money. So it is not only the customers. Sometimes the banks are also involved. So Bank of Ghana should also come out with additional sanctions to banks that allow this to happen and they don't report.
And the good thing is that we've got the sanctions, and pretty soon we shall share with our viewers here on Joy News. Grateful speaking to us, Professor Williams Prepra, an associate professor at Andrews University. Always a delight speaking to you. Away from that, the World Bank is warning that Ghana's strong economic growth is not creating enough quality jobs to match its rapidly expanding workforce. In its latest Ghana economic update, the bank says despite steady growth driven by oil and services, most Ghanaians remain employed in low productivity sectors. It is urging government to focus on job creation, skills development and private sector expansion to unlock the country's demographic dividend. Winston Taki reports.
Ghana's economy may be growing, but the World Bank says that growth isn't translating into enough decent jobs. In its Ghana's economic update, the bank finds that while output expanded by over 5% last year, most employment remains trapped in low productivity sectors like agriculture and informal services. Since 2012, Ghana's working age population has risen by nearly 3 million people. Yet, only 250,000 new formal jobs have been created. The report warns this gap is pushing more young Ghanaians to seek opportunities abroad. It also finds that only 13% of workers hold what it calls high-quality jobs, formal wage or skilled positions. And although education levels are rising, the economy is not generating enough productive work to match those new skills. The World Bank says tackling this challenge requires a sharper focus on job creation, skills development, and private sector expansion.
This is still Business Live. We have more stories for you after this break. Hello again, welcome back to Business Live. To one of our lead stories, the Bank of Ghana has revised the sanctioning regime in respect of issuance of DAT checks for strict compliance by banks and specialized deposit-taking institutions. The Bank of Ghana, in a statement issued today, said it had to take the action due to several abuses by customers, despite warnings issued by the central bank. And my colleague James Ishen joins me in studio for some details on the back of this. And James, even before we talk about the sanctions, right, let's talk about what that checks is. I heard Professor Pipra say that basically these are bounced checks. What more can you tell us?
Also, as Professor Pipra said, these are bounced checks, or better still, you could probably call it a bad check.
All right.
These checks cannot be processed due to, let's say, insufficient funds with respect to the issuer's account and also other related issues. So these are what, when we say that checks, this is the basic reason or basic explanation for bounce check.
So walk us through the sanctions.
Now, let me quickly do that for you. And from the revised sanction from the Bank of Ghana, it states first-time offenders face 10% of the check's face value and will be placed under surveillance for at least a year. It also went on to say second offense attract a 15% of the check's face value, warning notice and report to BOG and credit bureaus. It also has other sanctions as well for offenders. For the third one, it talks about the third offense of within 1 year of first offense attract 20% of the check's value. And BOG bans customers from issuing checks within the country for a minimum period of 3 years. So these are the revised sanctions coming all the way from the central bank.
All right, and I'm sure the Bank of Ghana has also been speaking to the banks and, of course, specialized deposit-taking institutions on the back of this. What more have they been telling them?
Well, they've been telling these banks to, ensure that data on customers who issued these DAT checks must be submitted to the credit reference bureaus, and also failure to submit returns or the submission of inaccurate or incomplete returns shall attract sanctions. So this coming from the central banks that had to do with what they are expecting from these banks.
All right, thank you so much, James Ishen. And of course, we are hoping that these sanctions will definitely bite to us, basically at the banks, for us to have a smooth financial system. Now, we want to stay a while longer at the central bank because they have now set October 28th to commence the celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Ghana cedi. The celebration, which was initially planned for August, was suspended after the helicopter crash, you recall, in the Ashanti region some time ago that claimed 8 lives. We have more for you on that.
As part of the activities to mark the 60th anniversary of the cedi, there will be a national launch ceremony at the Accra International Conference Center with President John Mahama as the special guest of honor. There will also be a cedi van regional roadshow, exhibitions, education and outreach, as well as public education campaigns on clean note handling, currency security features, and history of the currencies since independence. In addition, the Bank of Ghana will organize currency conference featuring stakeholders from central banks across the world, academia, and the private sector.
Now, the secondary bond market turnover increased by 33.12% week-on-week to 1.87 billion cedis from 1.41 billion cedis the previous week. More in this report.
According to the trading results, the February 2035 maturity-led flows with 483.92 million Ghana cedis in volumes traded. However, the 2031-2038 bond led market activity. It accounted for a combined 68.6% of total volumes at a weighted average yield of 16.10%. Meanwhile, the 2027-2030 papers accounted for 31% of trades at a weighted average yield of 15.65%. Data Bank Research said it anticipates the market momentum to remain firm in the coming weeks, with short to medium yields staying broadly anchored amid improved investor sentiment following Moody's credit rating upgrade.
And to some other stories, Chief of Staff Julius Deborah has called on board members of various public institutions to ensure improved corporate governance as a catalyst for economic growth. According to him, a strong governance system has become the foundation for a strong economy due to the role board members play in the profitability of state-owned enterprises. He was speaking at the second National Boardroom Governance Summit here in Accra.
A theme daring to be different, the role of chairperson in effective boardroom governance. This year's summit is exploring how bold and ethical leadership can drive sustainable organizational and national growth. According to the Chief of Staff, accountability in the boardroom ensures business growth, which benefits the economy.
Strengthen supply chain governance and measure sustainability as a core boardroom metric. Build a next generation of leaders and insist on ethics as the foundation of performance. Governance is not an event, it is a continuous discipline. From Ghana to Rwanda, from Senegal to Botswana, the pattern is evident. Where boardrooms are accountable, capital is pertinent, businesses thrive, and societies prosper. When boardrooms governance improves, economic growth becomes inevitable. And when growth deepens, national stability endures. Let us therefore dare to be different by governing well. Let the boardroom be the engine room of Ghana's transformation. Let a 24-hour economy be disciplined, not chaotic. Let ALTA become a platform for Ghanaian excellence. Let Agenda 2063 becomes our generational contract with Africa's future.
Convener of the summit, Professor Douglas Boatin used the occasion to call for some review of board tenure as he believes the 4-year term is inadequate for any significant initiative.
Most importantly, appoint a chair for a 6-year term. These 4 years is not working. Let's be bold. Let's be daring. Let's make it 6 so that there will be proper transition in between. Because right now, every 4 years, there's a wholesale change, and then we start again. We all know it's not working. Let's dare to be different, because at the end of the day, we are one people and not separated by politics.
The event brought together past and present chief executives and board members of organizations across sectors to deliberate on efficient policies for growth.
Lead counsel at Stratford Law, Mami Tutua Datsun, has revealed that the Ministry of Finance has promised to introduce the Limited Partnerships Act next year. According to her, the enactment of the Limited Partnerships Act will enhance investor familiarity and confidence in Ghana's legal and investment environment. Her remarks follow a recent study conducted by Mennonite Economic Development Associates known as MIDA, endorsing Ghana as a hub for Africa-based investment vehicles.
The major one now is really the Limited Partnerships Act. It's become a major issue. And at the moment, practitioners are struggling to structure funds that will return capital to investors. And investors want their capital to be returned. They don't want permanent capital locked in forever. So that is a major issue that we need to surmount. My understanding is that the Ministry of Finance has said that we will have that law by next year, and we're really looking forward to it. Because what it does is that the investors' familiarity with the jurisdiction will be greatly improved. Also, I see that there's a lot of collaboration between the ORC now and all the other stakeholders involved in company regulation. And that's a good step because that fragmentation causes a lot of frustration for investors. And we've seen investors very exasperated about having to deal with multiple regulators. And also, if we look at our tax, we need to have a look at that as well, because if we want to be intentional about attracting fund domiciliation in Ghana, we need to give something. And therefore, we have to look at some tax incentives as well.
All right, let's now go to myjoyonline.com/business for some quick read on the portal as we have it. And you can get more stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business for the very latest business stories here in Ghana and beyond. All right, so rather unfortunate we aren't able to bring you that, but you can visit myjoyonline.com/business. I am Pius Kojo Baka, always a delight serving you.